Thanks everyone for attending our 7th webinar, Focus 247. For anyone who hasn't joined our previous webinars, every 2 weeks I invite a member of the Workday ecosystem to come on and talk as a guest on various topics. For the attendees, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions via the Q&A. Please ask your questions via the Q&A and we will try and get through as many as we possibly can, okay? So the format of the webinar is we're going to discuss a couple of topics, myself and Michael today, who I'll introduce in a moment. And at the end of each topic, I will then open it up to Q&A. And as I said, we'll try and get through as many questions as we possibly can. So without further ado, welcome to the Focus 24/7 webinar, Michael Ruiz. Do you want to give everyone a quick 10 to 15 second overview, if you can do that, of course?
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you for having me, Lloyd. I'm really happy to be here. So good morning to everybody here in the US. Good afternoon for everybody across the world. My name is Michael Ruiz. I am a recruiter in the Workday space. I started recruiting literally in a couple of weeks, 8 years ago. I started recruiting the Workday space in the summer of 2015 for an agency here in Atlanta in the southeastern United States. So I made my first placement ever for a integration developer at SunTrust, which is a regional bank here in the United States. And then, continued to recruit for a few years after that, went to Accenture, and now I'm at Kainos. So that's a little bit about me, and we can talk more later.
Yeah, this is a bit of a different webinar this week. As usually, I invite people from the Workday ecosystem, but perhaps more people from a technical side. And what this webinar is going to be focused around is it's going to be around the hiring techniques, strategies for candidates in the Workday ecosystem. And you've got of course Michael Ruiz who's on as a guest today, and you've got myself and various members of my team in the background as well. So, by all means, fire away with any questions or any statements that you have, again, in the Q&A. So we'll go into topic one, Michael. And obviously, there's differences, isn't there? There's differences in hiring depending on which country and which region that you are hiring. And sure. I think, I've been doing recruitment for my sins, and as you can see, I've been doing it too long now with the haircut. It's a preference, by the way.
Hey, there you go.
One of the things that I was really stunned about when I first started working a number of roles, and it was actually before my time in Workday. It was SAP, and before that it was Oracle. Was that in the US you have 2-week notice periods. Yep. In the UK and across Europe, it's anywhere between 4 weeks and 3 months.
Right.
That's got its positives, of course.
Of course.
The company is looking to hire Workday skills because, within, as long as you've got a good pipeline of Workday skills, for your project or consulting partner or whatever it is, you could get your person on the ground within 2 weeks.
Right.
But there's also negatives to that.
Sure.
It means that you could lose someone from a project who is absolutely critical. And in the Workday space, as you well know, you have various skills which are extremely difficult to find, even in the US, which is a lot more populated for Workday skills than it is in Europe. You could lose someone from your project in 2 weeks, and you can't replace them.
Yeah.
What examples can you give of being an internal recruiter? Of course, being able to have that luxury of bringing in someone within 2 weeks, which is great.
Right. So I've seen.
What instance have you seen when it's gone the wrong way too?
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword. It is a little bit of a catch-22, and I've seen it both from the customer side and the internal partner side, to where, now I will say most people that I speak to who are looking to leave they do a pretty good job of trying to leave after a project's over. So I will caveat that conversation with that. But it is a situation where if someone really has the opportunity to travel less, make more money, have more flexibility, sometimes they're going to leave companies in a lurch. And of course, they don't necessarily owe that company anything, but it's a situation where, hey, I really had this great opportunity. If I don't take advantage, I'm going to lose out. So I've seen it to where it's left companies in a huge lurch and they've had to quickly ramp up and try to find someone else. And I think in that instance, we've seen companies overpay for individuals or bring in someone who's clearly underqualified. So it can go normally one of two ways. And normally it's pretty difficult unless you have a strong brand and talent acquisition to bring in the right person in that short period of time. Now, hopefully, if you're doing right by your employer, you let the employer know, hey, I'm leaving, in a respectable amount of time. But, people do not have to do that. And I've seen that happen across every industry, every level, every state here in the US. So it does happen. But to go to your original point, I was shocked when I heard someone in Europe have to give 3 months notice. I mean, to me, that's a lifetime away. That's, your life can change tremendously. I think we're all experiencing that right now, how different our lives were 3 months ago and then the 3 months before that. So it is certainly different.
I have no idea what you're talking about life being, Yeah, it is. I think from a recruiter's point of view, when you are recruiting for perhaps more senior positions in the UK, and there are certain countries in Europe where it's just standard to have a 3-month notice period. And I think it's important for the attendees to understand what a recruiter feels during this period, right? You would have a candidate who you've nurtured a relationship with for a long time. You've got them into your company, whoever that may be, end user or partner, whatever. You've managed to achieve together what the candidate was looking for, and then the notice period goes in. As a recruiter, there is a 3-month period where you don't know what's going to happen, because 3 months is a long time.
You're anxious, you're concerned, you want to make sure that you're doing right by that candidate. It's tough. Yeah, it's not easy. Yeah. So, but at the same time, we need to be cognizant that they have similar feelings, maybe in different, subsets of their mind. They're concerned, they're anxious. Hey, this is a long time, to flesh everything out. So, yeah, I get it. I certainly understand. But we need to be cognizant of that, and everybody understands.
There are a couple of countries in Europe as well that do have the same notice period as the US does.
Okay.
We've seen evidence of that, where you're able to pick out certain Workday skills within a 2-week period from countries in the European region, and then perhaps introduce them to other companies in the European region within 2 weeks. So, but naturally, as a recruiter, and this would go the same for an internal recruiter as well, you go where you go where the best people are, of course.
Right, of course.
You also go where you are guaranteed to have someone start sooner rather than later, as long as it fits in with the customer's goals, of course.
Of course, of course.
Another thing I see as well in the US, and of course we now have, as you well know, we have Focus Cloud USA in Canada, is the difference of how many agencies there are. There's a lot of agencies in the UK. There are a lot of agencies in the US, but do you think it's more focused towards agencies in the US or talent acquisition in the US?
So it's definitely more internal talent acquisition and recruiting. I mean, I think Ryan on your team at Focus Cloud, told us the other day there's about 40,000 agencies in the UK and there's 20,000 in the US. Well, the UK is 65 million people, whereas the US is 330. So there's way more per capita and twice as many for a fifth the population. So here in the US, it's much more normal to have an internal talent acquisition team supporting hiring. You know, companies like Google, Facebook, etc., are going to have literally dozens and dozens of internal recruiters supporting all the initiatives that they have. Same for any Fortune 500, Fortune 100 company. Now, what's different here in the US is that if you're in a really niche market like Workday, like an SAP, Salesforce, etc., you are going to have more of a need for agencies like a Focus Cloud and many others. So that's completely normal. And a lot of internal recruiters are not going to have the knowledge to be able to pick up how to recruit in Workday, Salesforce, SAP, you know, similar type of technology. So on the IT side, you're going to see more agencies, but a more generalist recruiting of other business functions, for lack of a better term. You're going to see more internal recruitment and internal recruiters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously do we do a hell of a lot of business in the US, as you all know, and I think one of our customers actually in the last, I say we won a customer about 2 years ago in the US, and within a period of time, we as a company, and we didn't have anyone in the US at all. We didn't even have someone working US hours. So we were working UK hours, and within the 2 year period, I believe that we as a company put more than 40 people into that practice. And I remember the internal talent acquisition team were just saying to us, how do you do that? Like, you know, you guys are in the US, we can't find these people in the US, even though we're in the US, but you guys are in the UK and you're able to find more than 40 people that we haven't found.
Right.
You know, so I think you're right. It's the TA. It depends on how good your TA person is, doesn't it?
Right. And I think depending upon where you're located, you know, for the attendees, you know, you really need to understand who are the big players in the Workday market to provide y'all some, you know, intrinsic value, really be able to ascertain who are the people that are the movers and shakers in the market, both from the internal perspective and the agency side, because both sides can provide a lot of value and ultimately be able to, if we can't help you, you know, give you some advice on who else to reach out to ultimately in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. We'll come on to that in topic 2 as well, when we talk about the partners and for the attendees and certainly the people that either if you are looking for a new role in the Workday ecosystem or you're not, either way, this is going to be priceless information for you moving forward, what we're about to say. And it's not going to be biased towards Focus Cloud. So it's going to be genuine, you know, neutral advice that you should listen to 100%. So going back to, you know, what's happened the last 6 months, you alluded to the fact that we live in a different world.
Right.
And we have done a few webinars before on the impact of the Workday, the virus on the Workday ecosystem. And I think we've done 3 webinars, which was a little bit focused towards coronavirus now. So we don't want to focus too much on that. But I think, you know, as a company, we got towards the end of 2019, and 2020 was supposed to be, you know, our fantastic year where we doubled as a company and we continued the curve that we were on. So we actually hired a number of people, perhaps that we actually didn't need, but we hired them forward for our growth plans. And you know, January started off well. We discussed this, right? January started off fantastically well. And February, yes, that was really good. It's a really good February as well. March was great, and then obviously lockdown then came because we're hearing about this virus. And I think we as a company, we obviously made the changes and the moves that we needed to make as a business to survive through this period. But actually, there's a lot more people that this affected, not only in the Workday ecosystem, but also in the recruitment sector. What about the internal recruiters within the Workday ecosystem? And of course, you're one of them. So, and I know, your situation over at Kainos, of course, you were extremely busy at the start of the year with ramping up requisitions. And then all of a sudden, coronavirus comes. What's the story there? Well, I mean, what happened?
So personally, I started in February with Kainos, and it was a situation where I was lucky enough to go to Belfast, our international headquarters, came back, and I think March 12th is when everything really shut down here in the US. I might be missing that by a couple of days, but it was amazing. I mean, the difference between March 10th and March 30th was night and day, to the point where, I was hearing from a lot of people in the Workday partner ecosystem that, firms like Accenture, Collaborative, Alight, just to name a few, were hiring like crazy. And Kainos was in the same position, just like Focus. We were expecting a huge, huge year as far as hiring, bringing in a ton of folks from financials, HCM, adaptive. Almost overnight went to no hiring. And the same thing with a lot of our competitors in the Workday partner ecosystem, not only here in the US and Canada, but Europe and globally as well. So it was unfortunate that happened, and unfortunately that set off a snowball effect of where people unfortunately were let go and or furloughed, and so that was really unfortunate. But good thing is that right now a lot of customers, I can speak to more the US than I could Europe or the rest of the world. Fortunately, a lot of customers are still hiring, so that's really positive. So just been trying to help people, get connected with yourself or get connected with other recruiters or apply internally to those roles to make sure that you can find a job as quickly as possible, because there are more people, unfortunately, who are looking for a job than I can ever remember in the Workday space right now.
But the good news is it will turn.
Yes, absolutely.
And when it does turn, also the good news is that there's not going to be enough people.
Right, absolutely.
And it's going to go back to the way it was before. In fact, I think it's going to be even worse than the hottest periods of the Workday ecosystem.
Exactly.
So we want to open it up to Q&A now. So questions. So via the questions tab on the panel at the bottom, you should be able to ask as many questions as you like. I see there is a couple that have come through already. So this one is this one's actually to myself and you, Michael.
Okay.
Sina asks, has Focus Cloud or Kainos seen a trend of companies moving back to hiring in the last 2 months? So would you like to? Do you want to answer that, or do you want me?
Yeah, sure. I know Sina. Hey, Sina, how are you today? So yeah, it's a situation where really, again, like I just mentioned, March, April, it was crickets for a while, unfortunately. What I really saw, at least here in the US, things didn't really pick up on the partner side. But what I was really encouraged, and to be honest with you, completely surprised about, was how many people started hiring. May 15th kind of seemed to be that day where people started to feel a little bit better. But what I've ultimately come to realize is that when you implement Workday, you are having a huge upfront cost to actually implement that. And depending upon the company, depending upon how many modules, there is, of course, an inherent cost. With that comes the necessary upkeep to maintain Workday as a whole. So I think companies were a little bit skittish and nervous, obviously, in March and April, but they really realized if we're having this much upfront cost, we need to maintain that to not have a total loss. So companies started to hire again. Now, not as much as maybe in January or February, like you mentioned, Lloyd, but I've still been very impressed on how many companies are still hiring throughout the customer side, not so much on the partner side, but it's really hitting a peak, especially, I would say, over the past month and a half, but it really got started middle of May, I would say.
Yeah. I've seen your, we're obviously connected on LinkedIn. I see a lot of your posts. So I see that you've managed to get this tip of the day, Workday tip of the day, and you also share some direct vacancies, don't you, on your LinkedIn profile, which is, we've spoken about it. I think that's fantastic. The way wanted to help the ecosystem.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's something that you know, people need to understand though, and I'm sure you'll agree. At the moment, you know, normally when you get a role come to market, whether it's in the US, the UK, Europe, doesn't matter. You would have a company would have a choice of, let's say, 3 good candidates, right? So at the moment, that 3 is now 10 good candidates, and that 10 good candidates that they've got for each role has been whittled down from that's a short list as well.
Sure.
So there is still very much a need for recruiters, because we screen those CVs or whatever. We make sure that the best people get sent to the best jobs and preparation and everything. But it's important, and we'll talk about it in topic 2 of how do you differentiate yourself as a candidate in the Workday ecosystem to the 10, 15, 20 other people that on paper look exactly the same as you.
Yeah.
You do that. It's really important.
Yeah. So for me, this is something that I have conversations about this all the time. So I know a couple of things that I feel very confident in telling all the attendees here. So first and foremost, your CV, resume, whatever you want to call it, make sure that that is indicative of your true experience. I have conversations all day with individuals who will talk for 10, 20 minutes about their experience, and it's wonderful and it's amazing and they've done a lot. But then when I come to look at their resume, it's only 3 to 4 bullet points for a role in which they've been, 4 to 5 years. That is not indicative of all the amazing things that you just told me over the phone. So what I would even encourage people to do is, I normally say you need to 95% of people, and this is something that I mentioned in the tip of the day, you need to make your resume longer. Now, there are the few amount of people who might have a 5-page resume that might be applicable to their experience. But most people, I say, you need to make your resume longer to speak exactly to your experience. Now, and I'll bring this back to the recruiting talent acquisition side, and Lloyd, I'm sure you can agree with this. For every recruiter like Lloyd and myself, there are dozens who have no Workday experience. So they're not going to be able to truly assess where you're at from a Workday experience. But you want to make sure that even someone who knows nothing about Workday can look at your resume and they have a basic understanding that you have said that you completed a PSA implementation or recruiting implementation, or you supported adaptive planning / adaptive insights, whatever the case may be. So that's one thing. I think secondly is always updating your LinkedIn profile. Lloyd, myself, many others in the recruiting space are on LinkedIn all day, every day. And because of that, the more updated your LinkedIn profile is, and the more seamless and similar it is to your resume or CV, that gives you a greater opportunity to impress folks like myself and ultimately hiring managers as well. And now, given that so many people are not currently working, I would mention on your LinkedIn profile, hey, I'm open to work. I'm interested in new opportunities. Give a little bit about your experience in your summary, or even just your experience section. And I think that'll go a long, long way. What do you think, Lloyd?
I agree. Yeah. I think we've gone from topic 1 to topic 2, so we'll just transition straight into topic 2. Sure. And topic 2, guys, for the attendees was actually how to go about finding a job in the Workday ecosystem, which we've already touched on. Right, so this is absolutely critical.
Right.
Keep your LinkedIn profile well up to date. Make a note on your LinkedIn profile if you are open to opportunities. And there is a function on LinkedIn, isn't there? I don't know. I've never been open to opportunities on LinkedIn, Michael, but there is a function in the back end that will allow you to be seen by recruiters as open to hear about opportunities. If you are open to opportunities, for redundancy or whatever else, you need to put that on, because believe it or not, with the search that you do on LinkedIn, especially in LinkedIn Recruiter, and to a certain extent, specialist Workday recruiters won't be using this. So you need to bear that in mind, and I'll come on to that after. But your generalist recruiters will probably go into a certain area of LinkedIn. They'll put in some keywords like Workday. And the first thing they'll do is they will search under open to opportunities. And if you are open to opportunities but you're not on LinkedIn, then you won't get contacted.
Right.
That.
Right.
Yeah, your CV, of course. I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Michael. I've always been one for your CV should be as long as possible. And I've heard various stories over the years of people say, well, you know, I've been recommended that my CV is no longer than 3 pages. Right. Well, I don't know. If you have an absolutely dynamite CV, now bear in mind, if you're going into applying for a Workday role, then you need to make sure that your CV sells all of your Workday experience very easily to see as well. But you may have come from an Oracle background or an SAP background, but that may have been 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, right? So unless there's something in your SAP or Oracle, whatever background that is relevant for your Workday career, you should minimize that part and emphasize the Workday part. For example, if you are applying for a Workday financials job, and you have been in Workday financials for the last 5 years, for example, that should be the focal point of your CV. If that ends up being 4 pages, then it ends up being 4 pages.
Right.
If you was an accountant before you got into Workday financials, then that should still be on your CV.
Right.
Maybe not as emphasized as the Workday implementation experience, but it's still very relevant because you're an accountant and you understand how finance operations works. So that's the key thing. I'm more than happy to give any of myself or any of my team will be more than happy to give CV writing advice to anyone who needs it.
Yep.
You know? And that's obviously free of charge, of course.
Yeah.
The other thing.
And one more thing on top of that, Lloyd, I apologize, but you know, I've been seeing resumes that are 4 or 5 bullet points, like I mentioned earlier, and they, you know, I just received one earlier. Someone here in the U.S. who works at a partner, 4 or 5 bullet points for the past 5 years, looks like good experience, but was talking about a role outside of Workday from 2003 to 2008 with about 10 or 15 bullet points, and that just doesn't match up. You know, it needs to be the reverse. You know, you don't need to speak about your experience 12, 15 years ago, especially if it's not, well, virtually cannot be Workday related if that's long ago, in comparison to what you've done most recently. So that's all I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good point. Yeah, so make the Workday experience bigger than the rest of the experience.
Yeah, of course.
And what else? So you should speak to the specialists in the marketplace. You know, there are some specialists. There are recruitment companies that have Workday teams. There are a few recruitment companies that specialize only in Workday, such as Focus Cloud, and there are others that have Workday teams. They are also very good. Some of them not. I'm just going to put it out there. Some of them don't even know what they're talking about. They don't understand Workday. So in my opinion, they have no business being in the Workday ecosystem, but there are others that are very good and do understand what they're talking about. And you asked me the question earlier, well, how would someone know? How would someone know who the best agencies to speak to are? Well, anyone who is in that list will tell you who the best agencies are.
Right.
Anyone who says to you, you know, any recruiter who turns around to you and says, you know, there's, you know, I think anyone who puts down their competition when they are competition, you need to question whether they're the right person for you to speak to. But you know, I know that there are recruiters out there that if you ask them the open question, who are, in your opinion, the major players in the Workday ecosystem, they will give you a list. Because the truth is, not every recruitment company has what we call supplier. They call it PSLs in the recruitment space. Each individual recruiter has a selection of clients, And we're all going out after new clients all the time. But some of us have agreements and some of us don't. So that's why it's good for you as a candidate to be speaking to the major players only. Because if you're speaking to the major guys within the Workday recruitment ecosystem, you're going to get access to most. You're going to get access to 90% of the Workday projects that you need to.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think, especially if you're brand new to the Workday ecosystem or just graduated from uni or college, one way to assess that is trust your gut and see who provides the most value. You know, if you're speaking with Lloyd and he's providing you a ton of value versus someone else who's just trying to sell and fit a square peg into a round hole, I think that's where you can truly assess who knows what they're talking about and who would be the most valuable person to speak with. That's my thoughts as well, just to add on top of Lloyd's great point.
Yeah. I think it's all about, in our space, it's all about open and honesty,
right,
and ethics.
Sure.
And I think, you know, the attendees, you're smart enough to know who's got ethics and who hasn't. You hear it when you're speaking to someone. So, okay, so we've got a few questions here. So there was someone actually who asked a really good point, and I want to make sure that we go over that. So it's actually in the chat part rather than the questions part, but that's fine. There was someone who asked, right, so Charlene asks, I've been laid off and therefore lost my access to Workday community by the account. Any ideas to keep it current with Workday without access to community?
I get this question all the time, and I think if I know who this person is getting up pretty early on the West Coast. So good morning to you, Charlene. So I get this question all the time. Unfortunately, Workday is in a space where it's a very tight-knit, close-knit community. For lack of a better term, community you don't have access to. There are not many resources that you can find online. Lloyd, please correct me if I'm wrong here, that are really worth upskilling yourself on. The only thing that I have been able to find, and I can't independently verify if this course is any good or not, and some people have said it's good, some people have said it's okay at best, is you can go on YouTube and type in Zarin Tech. So that's ZARANTECH. That's about the only thing that I can find that might help upskill and continuously train you when you don't have access to community. Outside of that, you would just have to reach out to people who are, you know, in the testing phase of 2020 R2 and just hopefully they give you some snippets. But that's the only thing that I have seen so far. But it is very limited from what I can tell.
Yeah. I second that. So the issue when you leave a party, you won't have access to community. There is no current way to get that. So I guess if you've got perhaps independent contractors that have some good training material, that might be a good idea. You know, if someone does want any information on any training material, we have a number of really strong contacts in the marketplace, and I'm more than happy to connect you guys to them directly, and they will share that information with you. They'll do for the recruiters over at Focus Cloud as well. The way that we get our guys upskilled on Workday is we use our key people in the marketplace. Right. So we've had actual certified consultants coming into the office doing training for all of the recruiters here. So, you know, we're not only recruiters, but we understand the Workday ecosystem and the parts of the projects that you go through. So, and that's both for HCM, financials, and we also had someone in recently for Adaptive Insights. So if you want any connections to anyone like that can help you, upskill you whilst you're out, then let me know or let Michael know.
Yeah.
There was a question. There was a question by one of you guys. I know the answer. Just trying to find it. I think we're just going to have to go through one by one rather than me looking.
It's okay with me. Let's go for it.
Here, which is great. Someone asked, do we think that the partners are going to use independent contractors whilst they're going to need to upskill?
Yeah.
As soon as the turn in the marketplace comes, they are going to need to upskill. So I guess there's only one answer really to this, isn't there? In the US, there is an option for contractors to be certified. If you're talking about certified resources, in the US currently, there is an option where people can move from being a permanent employee, to being an independent contractor, and you can maintain your certifications.
Right.
And I see in the US that has been a huge resource to tap into for the partners. When the market turns, yes, they're going to need to tap into independent resources. Currently, you cannot do that in the UK or in Europe. So there are other options that you can look at for those particular locations, but in the US, there is a way that you can do it through Workday's community. Paul Terry, good afternoon to you, sir. Are you seeing evidence of clients who closed subscription deals before lockdown but didn't kick off delivery now, planning to spin up the delayed program activities either in partner selection or client-side roles? This is probably towards me, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a better question for you, Lloyd. I have my thoughts, but I think you might be better off answering that.
Yeah, I think, to the answer to that, Paul, is yes, we are seeing clients who closed off subscription deals that were supposed to start implementation projects just before lockdown or way before lockdown ever started. And because lockdown has kicked in, things have delayed, but more and more are coming back to fruition now. So September time and October time is when we see a lot of those projects coming off a pause, if they are on pause. That's also mirrored by the partners as well. You know, a lot of the ecosystem is driven by the partners. If the partners are busy, it means the customers are busy. There's lots of customer projects that are going on because the partners need to hire. At the moment, the partners aren't hiring, but they are saying that there is going to be a huge increase in September.
Yep. Yeah, I think so as well. And Paul, from the recruiting perspective, here in the United States, actually, there's the most amount of hiring is normally done September and October. So if partners and customers are thinking ahead of the game, especially with the amount of talent that's available, if they can kick off these projects as well as bring on the right amount of talent, September, October timeframe, they'll be in a really good space. But if not, then it's a little bit tough. The last 6 weeks of the year here in the U.S. are kind of tough. And I know you're not based in the U.S., but it just gets difficult around the holiday season, and then things might be pushed back to 2021. Hopefully I'm wrong. I hope I'm very wrong, but that's what I see as well. I'm hoping things really pick up over the next 2 to 3 months.
Yeah. We've got someone here as well who asked a question. This person is anonymous, but they are a couple of years out of college with a little bit of work experience. They want to land a role within a Workday implementation partner or a customer, but they don't have a Workday certification. For me, and I'll let you answer as well, if anyone ever reaches out to me or any of my team and they haven't got any valuable Workday experience, but they have the necessary educational background, there's been several times when we've introduced those types of people directly to our customers and not charged a fee.
Right.
Because that's the right thing to do. Right. Or you send them across the emails of someone like Michael or whoever it may be within a partner or an end user, and if you guys can connect direct, then so be it.
Yep.
Would that be how you would have answered that question, Michael?
Yeah, so I think it could be just a variance between the UK and here in the US too. One thing, and I get this question all the time because I see a ton of people, spouses and significant others, especially of people who are consultants in the Workday space, want to get their accountant husband to get into the Workday space. But nevertheless, I think it's a situation where you need to find the right people to reach out to, but also if you are that person who's a couple of years out of college, wants to get into the Workday space, do some research and really get an understanding of the Workday market as much as you can on Google. Maybe put that on your resume and say, hey, I've done this research. I've reached out to some thought leaders just to give people an idea that you care and are very interested. I think that would go a long way. But also mention how your previous accounting experience could match up to Workday financials. Or, I've actually seen quite a few recruiters move into a Workday recruiting consultant role. So make sure that your resume speaks to how you can transition into a Workday role without you understanding the system. And even if it's reaching out to a friend who's a HCM consultant right out of college, pick their brain and understand what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Even if they've only been in the role 3 to 6 months, they have more experience than you do. So just try to go from there. But if you're really at a loss, reach out to Lloyd, myself, someone like that, start to build a network and then go from there. It might take some time to ultimately get your foot in the door, but ultimately everyone that works in Workday did not have Workday experience beforehand. So somehow they built that bridge and went from there. But that's a really good question.
Yeah, I think as well, it's something that we need to mention as well. Like, don't be afraid of, I hear it so much where, someone might send you an email and say, I didn't want to call you because I didn't want to bug you. These are candidates,
Right.
I didn't want to call you because I didn't want to bug you. I know you're busy and stuff like that. You need to bug people. You really do. You need to bug people. And I'm not talking about to the extent that we do as recruiters. There's a certain level that
right.
we as recruiters have to and are prepared to go to in order to get through to a customer, right? But as a really strong Workday candidate with excellent skills, you should be talking to your agency points of contact once, maybe twice, maybe even 3-4 times a week, if not more. Because the more you're in their mind, the more when that role comes up, you're already in their mind and they think, well, call that person. The amount of times I've had someone say to me, I didn't want to bug you. And I always say, you're never bugging me. If you're dealing with someone from an agency who you actually feel like you're bugging, when you kind of get that feeling, you can get that kind of tone, that sense, right? You're dealing with the wrong person.
Right.
Just stop doing business with that person.
And that's honestly great advice for experienced folks as well. If you've ever been on a phone call with me, I've most likely told you we're all human, Lloyd, myself included. If we've talked to you on the phone, we're more likely to consider you for a role than someone that we've never talked to. That's just how recruiting goes. It's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just the reality of human interaction, I guess you could say. So I'd highly recommend that for experienced folks as well.
Yeah. So I mean, sending an email across when you've got like a chock-a-block email, sometimes the emails can get clogged up. Emails can get lost. Emails can get missed. But a telephone call or a message on someone's answer machine or a text message, you can give me a call back. I tried to call you.
Yep.
If you're dealing with the right person from an agency, they will call you back.
Right.
If they don't, you should stop doing business with them.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, really, really important. Got some great questions here.
We got a bunch. Keep going.
Yes. Saktival from Singapore. I'm not going to read this out, but you can probably see that in the Q&A, Michael.
Yep.
So he's attached a lot of partly of his CV, right? So he's got some testing experience here. And then it looks like he's gone into as a test lead in Workday Financials. He wants to know what the next step for his career should be.
Yeah, so he's also asking about the scope of regional, implementations in Asia Pac. So I'll kind of answer both those questions here. So one thing that I've personally noticed, and Lloyd, I'll get your opinion here too, is that, Asia, Australia, that part of the world, it's going to boom when it comes to Workday implementations. It's not a matter of if or when, it's just how quickly and how often we'll see those things grow. I mean, there's a ton of people supporting implementations in India, Philippines, Australia, New Zealand is growing like crazy. We're seeing a lot. Hong Kong, Singapore, Korea, South Korea as well. So a lot of Fortune 500,000 companies are implementing Workday there too. So, you see things like collaborative solutions acquiring Theory of Mind to really get their foot in the door in Australia and in Asia as well. This happened a couple of years ago. I think that's really indicative of what's happening there. So the growth there, just like the rest of the Workday ecosystem, will be crazy. And financials will definitely be a part of that as well. That might lag behind the HCM side just because Asia is still relatively new. When it comes to your career specifically, that really depends upon what you want to do. If you really want to get involved in the testing side, I think that's something that's an incredibly good niche to be a part of. There's very few testing individuals in the Workday space, so I think you'll be in very high demand for the foreseeable future. Both if you can, from a manual testing perspective, and if you can automate it with a certain tool that's available, that'll be good as well. But if you want to transition, that's okay too. I always tell people there's no right or wrong path in the Workday space. I think this goes without saying. In the accounting world, it's you're accounting 1, 2, 3, senior, lead, director, maybe different titles around the world, but it's a pretty rigid path to success. Whereas in Workday, there's really not a best case scenario for that. So that's just my opinion. But if you ever have more questions, feel free to ask Lloyd, myself, others. Will be more than happy to help.
Yeah, I've got a project kicking off. I'd love to speak to you tomorrow, where they are going to be looking for some test resource. And the fact that you are where you are, Sativol, will be absolutely perfect for what I'm looking for.
Right.
And I would say that financials experience, that testing experience in financials, is perhaps what sets you apart from, because there are other really good test guys, but not many of them have financials. They always have HCM experience. And I think that if you've got some good experience in financials, that will be priceless for you moving forward. Thanks to Andre for sharing the sharing show. So I want to put that again on the chat. Guys, perhaps I'll put that on there as well.
Yep, that's a really good point. I forgot to mention that the sharing show is a really good resource. They have a couple of shows every couple of weeks, so that's really good as well. I forgot to mention that, so that's a great point.
Yeah. Do you think companies will look to upskill, recruit more internal people to be able to take on work maybe previously would have gone solely to a partner? So this is about end users. So Esther asks, did you get that one, Michael?
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'll let you respond. I think I need to understand that question a little bit more. Let me read it over a couple of times while you respond.
Thanks for that. Yeah. So the way I read that is, do I think companies will look to upskill, recruit more internal people into their internal teams to be able to take on work maybe that previously would have been given to a partner.
Got it.
Well, there's certain parts of the Workday project that you have to do with a partner. You don't have a choice. I don't think the ecosystem, certainly the end user ecosystem, totally understands that you don't actually need a partner to do the rest of it. A lot of companies that think that you have to go to a partner to do every single step of the Workday implementation. So once they are, it's going to sound awful, but once they're educated against the fact of that, then I think they will be looking to upskill their internal teams. They'll be looking to hire more and more people. That could be contractors, that could be permanent members of staff, people from the partner ecosystem that want to go to end users, whatever it may be. But I think until that happens, it will probably level out of where it is now.
Yeah. So yeah, I get the question now, and Esther, that's a good question. I think where I'm thinking ahead here. I think if I'm getting kind of the point of why you're asking the question is, one, if you're looking for a new job, I would, especially on the customer side, I think if I know who this person is, they work in the UK for an airline, but if you're looking for another job, it's a situation where I would really look for a Workday customer that has an intrinsic record of hiring well-qualified individuals. What I mean by that is they've hired previous consultants at partners or people who have risen through the ranks, ERP, HRIS, HRIT side, and really shifted to Workday. So you want to work under a Workday manager, director, or other consultants who have a strong background, because I think that's how you can upskill yourself. If you're in a situation where you're the only HRIS analyst at the company, and you're kind of left alone, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult to upskill yourself because you don't have people to bounce ideas off of. But yes, I ultimately do see a trend where customers are going to be, and they should be, upskilling those individuals the best they can, because the Workday knowledge that they have is so critical to their business functions from an HRIS and ERP perspective. So yes, there will definitely be more of that. I hope to see more of that in the future, but that's just where we stand right now.
Yep. Cool. Thank you very much. I'm trying to make sure we get through as many as possible. What do you think partners are looking for in Workday Pros? So another anonymous one here. What do you think partners are looking for in Workday professionals who have only customer experience to determine if they can make that transition into being a consultant? It's a really good question.
Really good question. Really good question. I'll give my 2 cents, and Lloyd, I'll let you give your 2 cents too.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. I think I have a unique perspective in that I've worked at the partner side as well as the agency side. And I'll give you a 360 view just to fully understand where I'm coming from in this answer. A couple of years ago, I think there was this assumption that working for a partner may be seen as a little bit higher level than working at a customer. I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe that's just because the Workday ecosystem was so tight-knit, and really before about a couple of years ago, there weren't a ton of customers. But it's a situation where working at a customer and working at a partner is not better or worse. To be honest with you, I have seen individuals who have been much better, who worked at a customer for a few years, than individuals who are certified. And I think that's the basic ethos of this question, is just because you have a certification is much like getting a degree. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're any smarter or less smart than someone who doesn't have a degree. It's just a barrier to entry, for lack of a better term. So when you're writing your resume, when you're speaking to Lloyd, myself, others, really give a good background of what you've experienced, what the Workday environment is like, and that can clearly translate to other clients who ultimately you would support via a Workday partner. So just show your true skills and what you've accomplished, and you are equally, if not in some cases, more qualified to go to a partner than someone who's been working at a partner otherwise. So it's all on a case-by-case basis, but make sure that your skill set is shown by what you say, but also how you write that down on your resume /CV as well. Lloyd, over to you.
Yeah. So we as a company, we've placed a number of people, taking people from the partner ecosystem and placed them into other partners. And we've also placed a number of people from the customer side into the partner ecosystem.
Right.
And you asked, what do you think partners are looking for in Workday professionals? So that was the question, right?
Right.
What partners are looking for when they take people from the customer side is they want to see the consultant, the inner consultant in you. And what I mean by that is, whenever I've got someone who's only worked on a customer side, I'm even more interested and even more looking at the reactions of that person. How are you explaining something to me?
Right.
You know, are you explaining it in a way that I can understand fully if I'm a customer, or is it like kind of robotic? Because if it is, you're going to find it very difficult to be a consultant. You know, so the answer to your question in a nutshell is what partners look for when they hire people from end users is they look for the inner consultant.
Right. I think that's a great point.
Yeah. So, and some people have it and some people don't. And it doesn't mean you're any better or any worse than anyone else. You know, I've seen fantastic people, especially integrations, right? Integrations is one of those, you know, it's one of those areas, isn't it? And I can see the smile on your face there, Michael. So you know where I'm going to go with this, right? I've seen fantastic people with integrations experience that it's very, very difficult to have a conversation with them, right? Because their mindset is and their personality is very like technical.
Heads down, get the job done. Yeah.
It's very technical. It's very, you know, you're very focused toward the coding side, the back end side of or whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter what product that is. Well, those people tend to be, they can work for partners in whatever space, but they tend to be more on the techie side of working for partners. So they wouldn't necessarily have huge access to customers. And the ones that are technical in the Workday space, it's obviously the integrations guys. The ones that have you don't have to be a flamboyant sales guy, right? But the ones who have the more flamboyant personalities that have those integration skills are generally the ones that move through partners very, very quickly.
Yep.
You know, they're the ones that, unfortunately, they are. It's going to sound awful, but it's the way it is. They're the ones that get promoted quicker, because finding someone with those technical skills, from an integrations point of view, you would find a number of people that have those same technical skills. The difference in the integrations part is the personality. So can you sit with a customer? Can you explain something in layman's terms to a customer that doesn't understand the technical side of Workday? And if you can, those people tend to move through partners a little faster, I've found. And they tend to be on a little bit more money. They just have a different life.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely.
They're quite rare. They're quite rare people.
Yeah.
Okay, so someone else asked here, what exotic skill set is still sought after, do you think, even in an economic downturn?
Yeah. So for me, and I think if you've ever talked to me before on the phone, I will always say financials. And I think that's just because, one, it's going to be a big portion of how Workday grows more organically and becomes full suite, especially over the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, even Anil Bhusri, who's the CEO of Workday, said, 2025 financials revenue for the company will meet or exceed HCM from that standpoint. And that's more so even well packaged from the adaptive planning / adaptive insights side, especially. So I think that's something that's going to be a huge growth pattern. I think especially literally as we talk 12 o'clock Eastern time on July 30th, if you have the chance to get into Workday Extend, I cannot recommend doing that highly enough. I was fortunate enough in my previous career working on the agency side to support Salesforce. And not to go too on the Salesforce side, but when Salesforce opened up or extended in their equivalent to the Force.com platform, Salesforce became the monster that they are now. And that's not only here in the US, but globally. So if you know Salesforce, you know that probably 5-6 years ago, you may not have been familiar with them, but you know them now. And I think Workday is at that same trajectory to where the ability for Walmart, for example, to build applications on top of Workday, the opportunities are endless just across not just Walmart, but any customer around the world. And to be able to get some money in because of that, it's just this snowball effect that's going to be huge. So I cannot recommend getting into Workday Extend. I think financials is huge. I'm seeing a big push on PSA, professional services automation, the testing side to the individual who hopefully should connect with Lloyd here tomorrow. I think testing is really big as well, but I don't want to undersell the HCM side. That's still incredibly important. But I think when it comes to the more niche skill sets, like the person who asked the question, I think it's financials, Workday Extend, and PSA. And again, adaptive insights as well. If you can get your hands on that, I think that would be incredibly lucrative, especially over the next 3 to 5 years. And we're going to see a lot of adaptive/financials projects happen back to back and or simultaneously.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with everything you said there. I kind of normally say about the more exotic skill set. The exotic skill set is when a customer calls you as, let's say, as a specialist recruitment company that focuses 100% on Workday, right? So we've got a really strong network globally. The exotic skill set is when a customer phones you and says, "Have you got one of these?" And you go, "Ooh, that's the exotic skill set."
Yeah,
and that is that's financials, as you've said. Workday Extend, absolutely. I mean, there's not many people who are actually doing that, and we're about to launch something in the next couple of weeks around Workday Extend, which you'll like, Michael.
Good.
Yeah, everything that Michael just said there, but don't forget HCM as well.
Right.
Advanced compensation, always a difficult skill to find. Easy to find someone with, a compensation experience, of course, but good, strong, advanced comp experience. Benefits, always very rare. Even in the US, that's rare, isn't it, Michael? I know when the first benefits consultant we placed was probably 4 years ago, and that was a tough find. We haven't had too many. It's not that much used, is it, at the moment? But
yeah, I think, and I don't know necessarily why that is, but I think because when it gets to benefits, it's a lot more complicated here in the US than many other places, and that's due to how the government does or does not administer healthcare, and that's a whole another topic for another time. Don't even want to get into that, but I think that's partially why. And because employers are so heavily involved in providing those benefits, it can get into medical stuff, and that gets kind of touch and go from my perspective.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yep. We've still got them coming. Sam says she's thrilled that testing's on the exotic list. It is. It's not hard to find testing people, but it's hard to find good testing people. And that is the exotic list, isn't it? It's not hard to find these skills, but it's hard to find good people with these.
Yeah, I think and that's always been the case, regardless of what type of testing, manual, automated. Doesn't matter what testing tool. There's a lot of people who are good to okay, but really finding the above average, excellent people, especially even more so in the Workday space. Hey Sam, how are you? So yeah, that's especially true. So I agree with that.
Yeah. We've got someone here who asks, ask about LinkedIn recommendations. Do we think that they are worth anything? Well, I hope so, because I'm almost at 100. So.
You and I might have a different opinion on that, Lloyd. So I'll let you go first, and that's okay. Okay. Yeah.
So are LinkedIn recommendations worth anything? This person has a few, but people still want emails from people as references. What's your thoughts on LinkedIn recommendations?
I'll let you go first, Lloyd. I think we might have a different opinion here.
Okay.
That's okay.
So I think it depends on what you do as a person. So if you are a Workday consultant, this is probably the first time I've ever been asked this question, actually. So I want to make sure I give you the correct answer. I will notice your LinkedIn recommendations. That's probably the way I'll answer this question. Is it going to make a difference whether I push you really hard to a customer or not? No, it's not. We as a company would not push anyone just because you had a LinkedIn recommendation from XYZ. It's always going to be that. It's always going to be that personal relationship that we have with you, and how you've conducted yourself on both sides. How you've conducted yourself during our relationship, and of course the references that we have from you in addition to everything we're seeing on LinkedIn. So that's my answer.
Yeah, my answer, to be quite honest, is I don't look at the recommendations. I just, a recommendation, you're going to ask your 2 or 3 closest coworkers, maybe a close manager to write you a recommendation. They're always going to write these glowing responses about you. You know, it'd be very hard pressed for me to imagine that someone would put a negative recommendation on their LinkedIn. And recommendations, I think pre-internet were probably very good because you needed another way of finding information about that person. I think now, normally, especially in a tight ecosystem like that, you know, you can reach out to, you know, Matt or Jessica or Bob or Christina, whoever that you know that knows that person. Hey, what's the real deal about this person? So recommendations to me, and it's not a, you know, Lloyd and I can have different opinions, and that's completely fine. You know, they don't do much for me. That's my personal opinion. You'll hear other recruiters who love recommendations and all of that stuff. I just don't read too much into it. So that's my personal preference.
But that's from a recruiter.
Better or worse, just the reality.
That's from a recruiter to a Workday candidate, right? But how about from a Workday candidate to a recruiter? So if I'm a candidate and I'm good, and you know I've got everyone chasing me, and I want to select maybe 1 or 2 people to do business with.
Sure.
Do you think that the LinkedIn recommendations would sway that person? Because I did.
I think it certainly could, you know, in that situation, absolutely. But again, I think if you think like me, now this is just a Michael Ruiz thought, remove recruiter, remove Workday, you know, I take those recommendations with a little bit of a grain of salt, because if I were to recommend you, Lloyd, I would never say anything negative. It would all be beautiful words and, you know, hey, Lloyd's a great guy. He knows a lot about Workday space. So that would definitely help. but I think you get where I'm going there, that there does need to be a little bit of, I don't know if even cynicism is the right word, but let's have a little bit of a gut check of how accurate is this really, you know? And so again, that's, you know, I want a level being realistic, but also being optimistic. And so that's my middle ground.
It's also about who it's from, right? So
sure, of course.
I think it's a really good question. I'm glad we're talking about it. I think that the answer that you're getting, and I can't remember who it was that asked it. Steve Gallier, I think it was. So you asked, does LinkedIn recommendations? It depends on what you do. So right. I think from a recruiter's point of view, looking at a candidate on LinkedIn, we never really look.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to ask our own questions behind the scenes. We're going to ask you for reference points and whatever. We're going to do our own diligence. But perhaps, you know, from the other side, from a recruiter, from a candidate, you would want to do business with someone who had a fair amount of recommendations, perhaps from some quite powerful people in the ecosystem. You know what I mean? So if it's just, you know, anyone, then okay, you might question that. But if you've got a recommendation from someone who's pretty powerful in the Workday ecosystem, and you have these people, you have very, very good consultants, and you have, you know, your partner guys and the very influential guys over at Workday and ex-partners and whatever it may be. If you're looking at someone who's got recommendation from one of them, I think you need to take that person seriously.
Of course, of course.
I've received a number of requests for recommendations in the past, and I only do a recommendation if it's for someone who I can actually recommend. If I can't, then I won't do it.
Right.
It will just still sit there, and I'm not going to say something that I don't know about someone.
Right.
So that hopefully answers your question, Stephen.
Yep.
We are running over a little bit of time, but we've still got lots and lots of people on, which is great. So we'll continue for another 10, 15 minutes, if that's okay. We have, do you see some Workday experts moving to other technologies like ServiceNow or SuccessFactors?
Yeah, I saw that question. This is a good one. Honestly, I rarely see that. Now, that could be more so a US-centric thing versus a UK, Europe thing. I can't speak to that as much, but here in the US, it's very, very rare that I see that. And I think that just speaks to the level of impression that Workday is making on both consultants and customers. That's it.
Okay. So for me, very rarely I haven't seen many people go from Workday to SuccessFactors, but I have seen a few people go from Workday to other technologies, and I won't mention those techs because they're a range.
Sure.
I think it's becoming more and more, it's a little bit more common than it used to be. Everyone was going from other techs into Workday quite a few years ago, and now you've got, and again, it's only like a couple of people that, you know, every now and again you would come across people who want to get out of the Workday ecosystem. It's very, very rare.
That's fair.
Yeah. We do have a topic 3 here, Michael, but I think we've gone over topic 3, and there's lots more questions here, actually.
Good. Let's keep it going. I have plenty of time. So hopefully if everyone who's watching, keep asking questions. I have time. Hopefully, Lloyd, you have the same. So
I have time. So we've got someone here. Okay. So someone asks, the partners like Kainos, and you've obviously worked for Accenture in the past as well, so you'll be ideally positioned to answer this. Prefer to recruit graduates and invest in training them over experienced people from a SAP or an Oracle background and train them?
That's a really good question. I think at the partners, it depends. It's very much so on a case-by-case basis. I think it's obvious that someone coming right out of university or college is going to be very junior, very green, not have a lot of experience, obviously. So they want to upskill that person within the partner space. At the same time, I think you're hiring those individuals for a specific purpose of serving as kind of the lowest level of the consultant spectrum. Now, when you want to get into someone who can get the job done right away, maybe you want to pull someone from another partner or pull someone from an Oracle, SAP, whatever space that can quickly transition. I think depending upon the partner, you will see different preferences. I think some companies love hiring from college and building those people from within and making it a very organic growth structure. Some companies are going to go the complete opposite. We're only going to hire previously certified individuals. We're going to pull from the other partners, and that's going to be it. In my opinion, there is not a better track to doing that. It just depends upon the partner itself. I think the partners that are going to be more so the incestuous from pulling from other partners are going to be your Accentures, IBMs, Deloitte's, KPMGs, PwCs. The more boutiques are going to be more rise from within, maybe steal some other folks here and there, especially if they're building out a new market, and then go from there. That's on average, but it's not always the case.
Yeah. We did an event for a customer in the Benelux region about 18 months ago, where we held an event and we invited around 100 people from the Oracle ecosystem and the SAP ecosystem, and the language was important. So we got all of those people specifically with consulting experience, but from those two markets, and got them all into one room. And we had Workday there who were presenting at the same time. And the idea was transitioning people from other ecosystems into the Workday ecosystem. And just to, I guess to mirror what you said about it depends on the partner, this particular partner, they wanted people from other partners. It gets to a point where, especially in those more emerging countries, especially if you're looking for languages, it will get to the point when you've seen everyone. Do you know what I mean? Because there aren't that many people. You know,
right.
If you want certified and you want X language skills, there are 15 people, for example. So once you've seen those 15, we've got to look for something else.
Right.
Otherwise, you're not going to fill your vacancies. Hence why we did the event, which actually went quite well.
Good.
So you've already answered that one. Steve asked partner versus client, breadth of depth of experience, better to highlight. Not really.
I see a couple questions here, Lloyd, so I'll pose them here and I'll let you answer. So I think a guy that we both know very well, Andre, are you seeing any demand for post-live resources for customers who have implemented using Workday Launch? And if so, with the announcement to extend this to larger organizations, do you think this will be a growth area? So I'm posing that to you. You go first.
Right. Am I seeing any demand for post-live resources for customers who implemented the launch methodology? And if so, with the announcement to extend this to larger organizations, do you think this area will grow? Yes, I do. Yes. At the moment, not particularly an increase of demand from launch methodology clients, but that's because we're in the situation we're in globally, right? So companies that you would normally expect to have lots and lots of vacancies don't have them right now. But when that changes and there's more of these projects, I do expect that to be a huge growth area, because I can't remember whether it was the webinar actually with Andre or someone else, maybe Gert. The launch methodology is, depending on the module that you choose, would depend on the best methodology to use. And the launch methodology, I believe, wasn't a thumbs up from that person on the financial side. So if you have gone down that route on the financial side, you may just about go live or whatever it may be, but that might be fine. But then there's a lot of work on the back end to make your system stable.
Yeah, I think from what I've seen, and this is just a very quick, maybe not snap judgment per se, but I've seen some customers who have said, yeah, Workday Launch probably wasn't our best option as far as when you're looking at it at a functionality versus time and money spent. But there are some customers who say, hey, I just want the system. I'll take the basic nuts and bolts and go from there. So it depends upon what that customer wants. Now, to specifically answer Andre's question, I haven't seen any specific need for that. You may eventually, but I don't see that being a big need as far as really specifying someone who has launch experience versus any other implementation method.
Yeah. Yeah. Got Mazroor here who asks, looking to join a Workday partner after working as an independent consultant for some end clients for a few years now. Appreciate any advice and help in this regard. So if you saw a CV come through as an internal recruiter at a partner, especially in this day and age, would you think to yourself, this person is looking for a permanent role because they can't get a contract at the moment?
No, I would just say, hey, they're looking for a new job in the Workday space, and thumbs up, sounds good. I don't have any immediate reaction. I think, that question, we could kind of refer back to what we mentioned earlier. I think the earlier question was moving from a customer to a partner side. What do you look for? Just refer to that kind of consultative mindset. I think you said it best, Lloyd, and that's something that's really important. And how do you provide best results? How do you create business processes that ultimately help the business utilize Workday to the best capacity in that customer? And how do you translate that to talking to a hiring manager or recruiter at a partner? I think that's the best succinct advice I could give.
Yeah. I think it's also convincing that person on the other end that is actually what you want. Because the concern that someone would have, and it's good that you don't have that concern as an internal recruiter, Michael, but I've heard this by many other internal recruiters, don't really want to hire ex-contractors because that person may only be looking for a permanent job until they get their next contract. And that's always a concern from a client hiring from that. And I think I would have that as well. Not that I would hire ex-contractors here at Focus Cloud, but you know what I mean? Like if there was that in recruitment. But I think as long as you're doing it for the right reasons and you can convince someone that you are doing it for the right reasons and you're going to be in their team and you have the plan to be in their team for a long time, then that would be my advice.
My personal perspective is the whole contracting versus permanent thing. I think we're in a time frame where if you stay at a company longer than 3 or 4 years, that's pretty long now. It's a lot different than back in the day when you worked 30 years at the plant at General Motors in Detroit, Michigan in the US. That just doesn't happen anymore. So for me personally, there are going to be people who are going to have that concern. You've been doing 12-month contracts for the past 7 years. To me, that does not faze me at all. So it just depends upon ultimate preference. There's no better or worse. It's just ultimate preference. Some companies love that. Some don't. There's no better or worse. It's just the reality.
Yeah. I've just been informed by the guys on the back end, actually, Michael, that we are going to get kicked off the webinar because it's only booked until 5:30, so we are going to have to tie it up, I'm afraid.
Okay, we can tie it up real quick.
It's been fantastic having you on, so thank you very much. Of course,
thank you for having me.
We are going to be, this is to the attendees that are still left, and we have quite a few actually still left, so we are going to be asking you for some feedback via an email. Please give us your honest feedback. We want to continue to improve these sessions. And also in the next session, I'm going to have one of the strongest Workday program directors, actually 100% from a European perspective, who's coming on the show to talk about his experience. And that's going to be, absolutely priceless for anyone attending that show, which you'll see us advertise that. I'm sure, Michael, you'll advertise that to your network for us as well, which has been great. And before we go, just a final word from you, Michael.
Yeah, so first of all, can't thank everyone enough for attending. I know it's been an hour and a half now. I know everybody's busy, but I really appreciate the time. And a couple people reached out saying good luck, so I really appreciate that. Lloyd, Focus Cloud, your team, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I love doing this. So if you ever want me back, assuming you want me back, I'll come back. I have no problem doing that. But if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to myself, Lloyd. His team's great. There's a ton of other Workday recruiters out there to reach out to too. I'm happy to answer any and all questions, Kainos or not, partner or not, agency or not, doesn't matter. England, UK, Europe, Asia Pac, Australia, USA, doesn't matter. I'm more than happy to help and just extend a helping hand. But thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you for joining, and I'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.